So you're very welcome to the evening session of the Teagasc Green Acres Calf to Beef programme virtual tour on the farm of Martin Connolly here in Castleplunkett, County Roscommon. Throughout the day you would have seen videos on Martin's farm here of the progress he's made, I suppose, since joining the programme in early 2019. In this panel discussion, obviously adhering to social distancing practices, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Martin's system, and I'll also be joined by James Fitzgerald, his dedicated programme advisor, and Gerry Cregg, his local Teagasc advisor. So we'll get straight into it. James, I want to turn to you first. Martin is running a bull beef system here on the farm, and he's doing it maybe because of the climate he has here and the soil type he has on the farm. But for you, what are the main factors that influence a farmer's decision on a system of production?
One of the main factors is land type you have and how it's set up, how split up it is it close to you, is it far away? That is going to have an influence on the system you choose for different reasons. After that then, I suppose you have to think about the labour input from your own side of things. Am I going to commit the hours needed every day to rear calves properly beginning to end? How is it going to impact on maybe another system that you might have running alongside it on the farm? Or is it going to cause a labour overload at different times of the year? Usually in the springtime, like if there's cows calving or other things going on a farm as well. So apart from land and labour, then you need to think about what's going on inside in the yard as well, what type of sheds you have and how they can be best put to use. If you're a bit short on slatted housing for finishing cattle, for example, or for storing cattle, maybe it's more in your line to go down a route where there is no second winter with cattle. We'll say that if you were finishing heifers at 20 months of age off grass, or like Martin here, if you were finishing bulls before the second winter, as long as you've got a sure route to market, we'll say. And then on the flip side of that, if you have a shortage of sheds that are suitable for rearing calves, you could think the opposite and go down a route where you're killing cattle at an older age, like 24 months or 30 months of age, where you're getting more carcass weight out of each animal you produce, we'll say, from your calf shed. So okay. they'd be the main factors to be thinking about in my books anyway. Okay, and Martin, I'll just pull you in here for those people that mightn't have seen the videos earlier on. Was it always Frisian bull beef here, or? Well,
there'd be a bit of Frisian bull beef going back the years. I would have maybe mixed in with continental Wainland bulls and bullocks along the way. But I suppose with the fact that Frisian bulls are readily available locally from good sources and healthy stock, and then the numbers had grown because of the course has been gone away. So like you had readily available stock there all the time, and I suppose it was just to maybe increasing and continuing what I was already at, and I suppose the fact I stay with the Frisian bulls, I find that we'll be getting a better live weight gain during their lifetime, and also as far as conformation is concerned, like we'll be probably staying in that O category for probably 90% of the cattle. There'll be only a small number going into the P category. I suppose compared to steers, you'll probably be having more maybe P grades, and the other part of it is that maybe the land type around here, I wouldn't be maybe as sure of letting out maybe 2-year-old cattle to grass for finishing. So we'd be finishing all the bulls, of course, under 24 months in that second winter. And I suppose that means that we have a higher stocking rate and more output, so they'd be the main reasons, I suppose.
Okay, sure, I'll pull you in on this, and it's going to continue on from what James said. Through your experience, what are the main pitfalls, I suppose, that farmers maybe just fall down at when it comes to choosing a system of production?
The system itself depends on, essentially it's controlled by beef price and cereal prices, so they're two big input prices. Your cereal input price is very big, and then you're totally dependent on factory prices at the end of the day. So there's a lot of the control of the system in terms of that out of the farmer's control. But looking inside the farm gate, what the farmer can control, the first thing is the calf price itself. And there's a huge variation around the country. Guys are paying for calves, and the unfortunate thing in the system, it's in the system at present, is that calf prices really in the country are too high. we have to remember that these calves are a byproduct of a dairy industry, and ultimately whatever you give for your calf determines what you're going to get out of the system at the end of the day. There's a lot of agents and guys around rings buying calves for guys, and they're taking a margin out of the calf before they start, and that obviously puts pressure on the farmer's margin at the end of the day. I suppose when you get back then to the farm itself, calf health is essential, and we heard Martin and James talk about the main issues around about calf health, and if you're getting sick calves and you end up with a lot of sick calves at the end of the day, you're going to lose money, and I suppose that's a big one. The other thing, and the two basics that's absolutely required for the system, is that you're a good grassland manager, you have a paddock system in place, and you're rotating cattle every 3 days. And the other thing then is that a prerequisite for the whole system is that you're making top quality silage. And top quality silage is made between the 7th of May and the 22nd, 23rd of May, aiming for 70 DMD or plus. And the nearer it is to 75, the more money you're going to make. And the hidden pitfall in the whole system then is that where people go out and buy calves, you're buying them relatively cheap, like Martin is buying them at under €100, and most guys, the Frisian bulls is not that attractive physically, but they're cheap to buy. But the pitfall in that is that you have a lot of fixed and variable costs associated with it. So for every calf that Martin buys, there's 700 or 800 fixed and variable costs against that, and you put that over 100, 120 calves, you're on 70 or 80,000 over 2 years that you have to get access to that money to buy inputs. And that relies on credit from banks, and that you have a relationship with your bank, and that, and certainly for guys starting off, that's a big issue.
James, I want to come back to you. We've had a very wet August, particularly in the south of the country and where we are here today. I suppose, what do farmers need to be looking at now in terms of weather? Should we be going in with meal to calves? Should we be holding on for another couple of weeks? Or what's best practice around this?
Yeah, I suppose, look at the levels of rain that fell in some parts of the country, coupled up then with just the natural decline in grass quality in the autumn. The result of it really is that for young calves, they need to be looked after from now until housing, really, because if they're not supplemented with meal, you'll be talking about maybe they might put on 0.4 of a kilo a day for up until housing. And the reason really behind that is grass dry matter is as low as 12% in some cases on that real wet weather autumn grass scenario. So if the grass is that wet, really, you're going to, the animal isn't physically able, a young calf isn't physically able to eat enough of grass in order to get what it needs out of it, because it's almost 90% water. So I would definitely, from now until housing time, be going in with a kilo or even more of meal, just to make sure that you have a certain amount of dry feed got into them, and to keep them thriving at a rate of maybe 0.7 or 0.8 of a kilo a day up where it needs to be. Then kind of, I suppose for the older cattle then, if you're finishing cattle outside and supplementing them with meal outside, you might think, just based on the same logic, to up the rate of meal a small bit, just to keep them going and keep them thriving for yourself. And I suppose if you're unlucky enough that ground conditions have really let you down, it might be a better plan to house and finish from inside. It'll cut out the weather aspect out of it at a bit of an extra cost, I suppose, but it could be worth it in the long run.
Okay, so just continuing on from that, Martin, how did you find the last couple of weeks or the last couple of months in terms of managing that little bit of tricky grazing conditions here on the farm?
Yeah, well, I suppose as far as we were concerned here, we didn't get maybe the same downpours of rain as lads in the south, so we weren't maybe just as badly done. But we were lucky enough, we got our silage and stuff in good condition. As far as the grazing is concerned, we would have been watching and moving the cattle a bit faster during the tricky times. Now, our younger calves would have been getting meal all through the season, and a bit over a kilo of meal. And our older calves would have been getting meal earlier on, but we had them taken off. But in the last week or so, we've gone back in with a kilo of meal to those, just to keep them gaining and driving on, hopefully. We'd like to keep the weight gain going with them the whole time. Yeah.
Okay. Gerry, I want to come back to you. We hear a lot of farmers maybe giving out or saying that they have problems with summer scour. What is summer scour in calves, and how do farmers prevent it?
Okay, So now the last number of years, we'd say there's a little bit of outbreaks of summer scour around about the country, and a lot of vets are beginning to talk about it and that, and there wasn't a lot known before this about it. And the main reason for that is that, you know, with improvements in grassland and numbers and focus on this system, calves now have access to higher quality grass. From a farming point of view, when you hear about summer scours, you associate it with a sort of probably a parasite burden or infection, and that's misleading to a certain degree. Summer scour is caused by a metabolic disorder more so than anything else. So what you have is that the majority of the calves in the country, as we know, are born February to mid-March or Paddy's Day, and you know, those calves are hitting grass. They're on meal, they're inside, they're fed. You make the rumen with them as quick as you can, and you're trying to do that between 80 and 100 kilos. But those calves are hitting grass then in the month of May and June when you have peak growth. And what's actually happening is that where you're putting those calves out on lush pastures, which are very high in protein, high in nitrogen and then high in protein, at the calf stomach level, the microflora in the calf stomach becomes affected, because where you have an underdeveloped stomach, the calves aren't able to handle high levels of protein, which breaks down into urea. That's absorbed as urea into the bloodstream. But what you have is that the calf's stomach is incapable of absorbing that urea, and as a result of that, that actually turns to an acid and creates an acidosis in the stomach. So where you have the villi of the calf, which are long processes, they're actually sheared off altogether, and you actually get an acidosis or a burning of the calf's stomach. And the symptoms of that then is obviously when you have calves there, they're on good pasture, you're doing very well, but your whole group of calves then lose, empty out in a matter of a day or two, and they lose dramatic weight within a couple of days. And you know, it's really down to making sure, it's really down to, you know, giving calves access to grass that's suitable.
And Gerry, if a farmer is unlucky enough to identify that they have a case of summer scour, what should they do then?
Okay, so the first thing, Niall, is to take them in off the grass itself, take them off that, reduce down the sort of exposure to the ammonia in the calves, take them in, and obviously there's an acidosis in their stomach, so you have to go back and treat them like a sort of non-ruminant as such, like. So the ruminant is non-functional at this stage, so you get them back on meal and get them treated again. So in some cases there might be an argument for going back on to milk if they're not that long off milk, and you start to develop it from there. The difficulty with them is that they're wide open to secondary infection from pneumonias and that's usually what manifests or will kill them in the end of the day. We've seen over the years that they'll recover, but it'll take 6 to 8 weeks for them to recover, so long as they're not getting that rich grass again. And once the 2 months is over, they can work away on good grass after that.
James, what other practices can we do in the early stages of a calf's life to make sure it's healthy and performs to the best of its ability?
Yeah, I suppose it starts before you ever get the calf at all. It starts with where you get your calf. I suppose the lads in the Green Acres programme, we've done focusing on getting calves in good sized bunches from as few herds as possible, just to make sure that there's no huge disease outbreak or that type of thing. It cuts down on risk of that. So that's really where it starts. And then once you get the calf and get them in on your own farm, you have to get the environment right in the line of sheds, no drafts, good deep bed of straw, and get his diet right, have free access to meal and water at all times, and make sure that the milk replacer he's getting is properly mixed to the right spec and that kind of thing. Apart from that, then it's the Green Acres farmers as well are focusing on making sure that they put aside a few minutes at feeding time in the morning and evening, just to make sure they've checked that every animal has got up, ate its full feed, looks bright, looks healthy, and that definitely shouldn't be underestimated in the line of picking up problems and keeping calves moving on, catch a problem in time and cure it in time, instead of letting it spread around the shed or go to an extent where an animal can't be cured. So them are the main things we're focusing on really in the Green Acres programme.
Okay. And Martin, have you made any changes to the way you used to rear your calves or implemented new practices here on the farm?
Yeah, I think we're always making changes and trying to tweak the system to some degree. As James was saying there, I'm probably lucky enough that I source the calves from 3 or 4 local farmers, and they're coming in good and healthy, and that's a great start. And then, of course, to continue on that, we bring them in, and usually we're getting them in bunches of 10, and they go into their pen, and you know, there's plenty of bed and plenty of straw. You can't maybe emphasise the importance of having a good warm bed under them, and that the calf can cradle into the bed. And I suppose plenty of clean water, and introduce them to their concentrate straight away, so that they'll be nibbling at that, and gradually increasing their intake on that, and good quality milk replacer and proper heat. There's a lot of different little bits to be done. I suppose it's always hard to do them all, but you have to try and work at it, and get them settled, and then get into a vaccination program to help them on their way as well. Yeah.
Okay. Gerry, James mentioned it there, the importance of providing the right environment for a calf. But new calf sheds are expensive. Beef margins are tight. Is there any changes that we can implement into existing sheds, maybe to lower the cost, but are still effective?
Well, I suppose that's the key thing going forward, is that if we could take it for what James is saying there, I suppose the two long-term effects, the two long-term disease effects that has a long-term effect on your daily gain in a calf is coccidia and pneumonias. And at all costs, it's a priority, particularly the second one, the pneumonias, to reduce them down as much as possible. And in a lot of cases that guys that go into calves or start rearing calves or become calf rearers, they're using the existing buildings because the system doesn't generate a lot of money, so you have to use the existing buildings. And there's by and large they're going into conversions or sort of old type buildings. A lot of the buildings in the past were built on the basis of protecting cattle on a storm or wet driving rain and wind. But in reality, only half the weather is like that. And in the spring, February to April, you have a lot of cold sort of days without any air movement. If you can get fresh air into the shed is the key. And that fresh air needs to be coming in at a height, not necessarily at calf level. And in a lot of cases, guys are actually using doors or openings to let air in, which creates a draft at calf level. So the options in terms of improving fresh air, so if you can get fresh air into the shed, you dilute half the bugs in the shed. So the key thing with it is that, obviously if you can get air on the eaves, so by putting up space boarding, but preferably Yorkshire boarding. There was a lot of vented sheeting put up in sheds and granted and everything else, and those vented sheeting has less than a 20% inlet and really is totally unsuitable for calf sheds. A lot of the newer calf sheds and a lot of the new developments in calf shed, and certainly across the sea, a lot of more guys are putting in positive pressure tubes, which essentially is a fan and blowing cold air in. And it's economically very cheap. It's about 1,100 to put in a fan, and I certainly, if anyone is serious about rearing calves and any number of calves over time, they should move to that direction. I've seen over in the first series of the Green Acres programme, a lot of guys converted, putting up Yorkshire boarding, putting in space sheeting. But by right, the best option would be to put in the fan and the tube itself. You have to remember, Niall, on it that these calves are doubling their birth weight in that 8 to 10 weeks. So their lung size is doubling and their respiratory rate is doubling. And combined with that, then you have a rise in temperature in March, and those two things combined, leads to detrimental effects on calves. And it's reducing down those sick calves is critical.
Okay, so some good points there. I want to move away kind of from the animal performance side of things and touch on what Gerry said already at the start of the video on calf price. I suppose, James, what did the Green Acres farmers pay for calves this year, and what calf was good value for the spring of 2020?
Right, so the average of the Green Acres farmers calf price wise was €65 for the Holstein Friesian bull calves this spring. It was 122 for the Angus bull calves, and it was 149 for the Hereford bull calves. It was then 140 and 150 for the Angus and Hereford heifer calves, and the continental calves averaged around €220 a piece. So what was the best value for money in that? In my eyes anyway, it was probably the Friesian bull calf this year. He cost roughly half the price of the Angus and Hereford bull calves and a quarter of the price of the continental ones nearly. And that just lower calf price, you're still getting a calf that's well able to grow and put on weight and give you back a good heavy carcass at the end of the day. But that lower calf price did definitely help in the Green Acres programme in just protecting our own margin, particularly in like in a beef climate where prices might be just lower than what we want really, and volatile as well. So yeah, for me it was probably the Holstein Friesian that was the best quality or best value for money this year gone anyway. Yeah.
Okay. And did that materialise on your farm, Martin? Were calf prices a little bit lower this year?
Yeah, I'd say about €30 a head lower this year than maybe they had been, you know. And like for me, I suppose you're buying, you know, it's a small price you're paying, you know, but it's after that then the costs stack up. And I suppose as part of the programme, some of the benefits from the programme from my point of view would be maybe being a bit more careful in the rearing of the calf and keeping him healthy and making sure he's vaccinated for all his pneumonia. Like we vaccinate for pneumonia a couple of days after they come in, and then they get their IBR shot, and following on from that then they get their first clostridial disease shot, and 2 months after they get another IBR, and then their second clostridial disease shot. Now we don't give them together, we give them at different stages. And then of course, apart from getting good feed into them and keeping them thriving and make sure that they're on eating at least a couple of kilos of ration before you take away the milk. And as Gerry had said there, I think it's all a gradual process to move them from one diet to another, and I'd say that's the key to it. And as soon as they're ready then to get them onto fresh grass, to get them acclimatised and keep the meal with them. And I suppose when you're talking about price and performance, we're trying to be working on the paddock systems for the older cattle as well, to keep them thriving their second year as well. It's all maybe focusing on keeping an eye on the costs, and probably traditionally we're putting in a couple of tonne of meal per animal to get them out the door. So I think with James's help and more guys and Gerry there, we're trying to get that down to at least 1.5 tonne per finished animal. And we'd be probably running at about 320 kilo carcass weight at the minute. So we're hoping with putting all those plans in place and keeping our fingers crossed that they all work. Of course, good silage quality is a big part of that as well. That we're probably getting up to 335 kilos carcass weight maybe, and maybe beyond if things go well for us. And then it's down to the selling price, which we have no control over, you know, but we were hoping to be getting in around the €1,100 mark for the finished animals, and maybe pulling back the killing age as well from just under 24 months to maybe back near to 22 months, and to get them through the system quicker, like, yeah.
Okay, so Gerry, I'll give the last word to you. We're in the west of Ireland. We're in a predominantly suckler area where farmers are producing suckler calves. Is a calf to beef system suited to this part of the country?
Yeah, well, I suppose, as you said, Niall, there's very few dairy herds in the country, in this part of the world, and it's been traditionally people have made a living part-time farming and cattle breeding as such, and suckler cows are very important in the area. The difficulty with the suckler cow, and over the last number of years, is that climate tends to get wetter, and you have this difficulty that you have a long winter with cows, and you know, a cow requires 10 bales of silage for the winter, whereas a calf only requires 3 bales. And the challenge that is there is that you know, it's just, you know, in this part of the world we used to traditionally always calf rear. There was calves brought from the south and reared, but that has been lost. I heard Martin speak about it there during the week, that you know, that tradition has sort of been lost to a certain degree. The big advantage I see in it is that if you have light calves, you can turn them out in February, March, and in Martin's case, like it's March, you know, and and we'd be encouraging maybe to go a little bit early if we could. The other side of things then, in the other shoulder of the year is October. You know, again, you can carry calves into October, November around here, and they're not doing any damage. If you have an 700, 800 kilos suckler cow, there's only one place that she can go on sort of marginal type land or wet type land. So as a result, there's a big option in it. And the other thing I noticed over the years is that when we looked at the profit monitors, you know, the suckler systems by and large have huge fixed and variable costs associated with them. And with that, it's very difficult to generate enough output out of your calf or your weaning or your store to cover the cost of the cow for the year. And with this system, the limitation is the numbers and the weather and the climate. With the calf to beef system, you can carry numbers and bigger numbers, and it allows you to drive output. And ultimately, as we've seen in all the Teagasc programs over the year, if you want to make profit at beef farming, it's ultimately driven by output, by driving output. So if you can generate enough output to cover your fixed and variable costs, then you're in a profit situation. And this system will allow you to carry the numbers to do that. Whereas with suckling system, you're carrying a cow and a calf to get 1.2, 1.3 kilos weight gain. On this system, you can carry 3 or 4 calves, get, doing 0.8 of a kilo, you're going to get more output per every acre you have.
Okay, I think we'll leave it at that. There was plenty of good discussion there and plenty of food for thought. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Martin for allowing us into the farm here over the last couple of days. It's not easy and it's much appreciated. I'd also like to thank Programme Manager Alan Dillon and the Programme Advisors Sean Cummins and James Fitzgerald for all their help over the last couple of days. I'd also like to thank the stakeholders involved in the programme. Without them, the programme just wouldn't be able to happen, so thanks for your continued support. If you missed any of the action from today, it's available on the Agriland platform and on the Teagasc social media accounts. But from all of us here in Castle Plunkett, County Roscommon, good night.